All right, welcome to another Thursday night meditation class. And tonight I want to take questions. Um, there are some topics we can discuss, but I want to see what you want to discuss first. So the floor is open. Remember, my answers are just my answers. You ultimately have to educate yourself, use experience, be more conscious, make better decisions for yourself. My answers try to come from more of the natural principles, Eastern philosophy, etc., etc. Martial arts background, obviously. And acupuncture, Chinese medicine. So, which is why there are some always current events with that, isn't there? With health. But questions? Any show of hands? Yes, sir, Mr. McEwen.
Thank you, Sifu. Um, when you consider books like the Bible and the Tao Te Ching and other important books about philosophy that were written a long time ago, most of the people at that time, the average citizens, were illiterate. Would you agree? I mean, who were these books written for, and why were they written in a way that was so difficult to understand? And they're still difficult to understand. A lot of them, like the Bible is written with a lot of parables, and a lot of other books on Asian philosophy. There's a lot of things are not exactly written very clearly to be understood.
When Lao Tzu, from my understanding, Lao Tzu was asked to write it down. He was a very wise old man, and people asked him to write down as he was leaving where he lived, leaving the village. They said, "Please write this down." And then one night he put together the Tao Te Ching. That's the legend anyway. And he said it was very simple to understand. And yet, thousands of years later, people still have all different kinds of disagreements and don't really understand it. But well, a couple of years ago, I did my own research with the different translations. And I don't speak Chinese, so that's a disadvantage. But I looked at the explanation of people who understand Chinese, and there's those who understand it very pragmatically, and there's others who understand it from more of maybe some medical or spiritual perspective, more historical. And so when I studied many different versions of it, and then put it in with my own experience, even working with oral teachings with teachers who understood those things. So it's not easy because you have to understand. It's easy, in my opinion, it's easy when you get the clear translation or if you understand a character, because you can translate something very specific, like very directly, word for word, and it could completely lose the meaning. And so that's a real problem. You lose the real message. But one of the things with the Tao Te Ching is actually, so in my history, my background, I trained with also took these week-long courses with Tom Brown Jr., Apache, Native American, survival type things, where we spent a lot of time alone in the woods. And to me, this was the most practical way to understand Taoism. He's not teaching Taoism, but he's teaching natural principles. He's teaching survival. He's teaching the most basic instincts that we have, but also need to learn. And what happens through not just meditation, but meditating in nature, it's like you can touch the mind of those who wrote those books. You have a more clear understanding of what they were trying to convey to the people, to the average people, because they spent the time paying attention. Like really, really being sensitive and aware to or of cause and effect. Person does this, this happens, right? And a lot of times people do something that causes trouble either for themselves or maybe people, their loved ones, and they're completely unaware and they keep doing it.
Mhm.
So that would be a level of consciousness that, Every time I touch the hot stove, I burn my hand. Maybe I shouldn't touch the hot stove. And so that's something that these ancient masters, human nature, it's like, what works in society? What works with people? What works so you can progress more? And the most important thing was always realizing becoming one with Tao, the oneness. Now, the Bible, I'm not going to pretend to be an expert, but I studied enough of it to know that, and to each his own with the specifics. But you said parables, yeah, but also allegory. Allegory meaning the stories are created to teach something very powerful, very necessary, very useful, and they're using people to stand for a quality, for example. Because if I go back to the Mahabharata in India, it's said to be based on historical events, but then the story was written for each character to be a part of our people, a part of us. Like all different emotions, um, challenges that we have. So the allegory there is what's teaching, instead of just straight believing stories like they're all historical, if that makes sense. So there can be a historical foundation, but then a story written to teach and pass down, and also to hide the information. Because if people don't understand that it's allegory, then it can survive longer. If it's giving people what those in power don't want people to know, well, then they could have burned it and it never would have survived. But another way, you said about being illiterate. So the books were written for more higher class people who could read, obviously.
Mhm.
And learning to read was a huge threat to the powers that be, and also empowering the common person. But don't forget, how long was the Bible only taught in Latin to people who didn't even speak Latin? So then all the congregation would sit there in awe with words spoken in their minds coming from God, because they don't understand even the words, what they're saying. So they have to listen to whatever the priest says, if that makes sense. So again, now it puts the church, it empowers the church because they have the book, and the common person can't read it for themselves. And so, hey, to each his own. Religion stirs up a lot of argument, but going back to my time in the woods and feeling most connected to all that is, and sort of you know, feeling these ancient masters coming through, like their message, you could see how they got their message. Compared to somebody reading something in a language I don't understand, where I have to hold that man or woman in, well, usually just men, right? The
Mhm.
man in awe, because he has all the answers, as opposed to my being able to find them for myself. Because we all have direct connect. We just have to get out of the way. We can never lose the connection to all that is, to God, to Source, but we just are too distracted. And so putting another person, another man between you and God, that man now has control of your spiritual development instead of you. And we know how much riches are in the churches, the Vatican. So that empowered them. That gave them a lot of control. It's no different than a government body. If the people have the power, Well, then they don't. They lose theirs. And so there's going to church in a building, and then there's going into what truly is God's church, nature. You think about that. Which one did God actually build? Because nature was there before we had anything to do with it. Usually, when you talk about people being illiterate and can't read, yeah, so they're like the slaves and the serfs. Who do you think was practicing martial arts? The people who had to spend their day making their life, or the people who had all they needed and now they could train in the martial military things? It was the rich training in the martial arts. They paid good money to the teachers, even in ancient times. You know, we're not talking building an army and a military. I'm talking about the arts, the martial arts. You know, who's learning Shakespeare, right? It's the elite. It's those who already have all the basic necessities in place. And so when people can't read, more people stay down. They don't learn any of these things. And that's why they call it a refined person who learns the arts, whether it's martial arts or literature or music, calligraphy, right?
Right.
So yeah, obviously it's written for those who are educated. But eventually, obviously, more people learned how to read. And so that was a great advantage. But many times I ask people, do you read? And they have this quizzical look on their face, and I do it on purpose. Do you read? And I say, what do you mean, do I read? I said, well, I didn't say, can you? I said, do you? Because if you can read and you don't, well, what good is it? There is a vast amount of education. You can get so much knowledge and even experience through somebody else. You know, these are teachers who put down information. And obviously you can read and you can like one thing and not like something else, but you absorb information. And this is how you better yourself. There's reading for entertainment, which is really kind of a waste of time. I mean, we all enjoy our entertainment, but realistically, it's a waste of time. I mean, I like sports. I'll watch sports and I'd sit there all the time like, there's always this voice inside like, this is such a stupid game and it's such a waste of time. But I grew up with it, so it's like part of I enjoy it, but I also realize how unimportant it is. Yeah, I mean, behind me, this screen, this virtual background behind me is books. It's just too many books. It's too distracting, so I use this. But if I pulled that up, you'd see it's just, I got a whole library here. It's like my habit has always been, if a question comes up that I don't know, I get a book and then I get the other person's perspective, and then there's like the opposing perspective, and I'll get like a bookshelf on that topic if I really want to understand it. Because frankly, I don't trust anybody, especially today. I don't trust anybody. Nobody on TV, nobody in books. I just read their information and then I use meditation. I use my own intuition to figure out what's right. And a lot of times when I figure out what's right through my own experience and judgment, it takes me away from the mainstream, which is interesting, actually, for what that's worth. Another question.
I think so.
Yes, sir. Yes, Mr. Antomate. Good to see you again.
Oh, sir, thank you, sir. There's a guy, he's kind of a public figure today. His name is Wim Hof. I don't know if you're familiar with him.
No.
You could find him like on YouTube or whatever. He does videos and stuff. One of the activities that he's become popular for exposing is taking ice baths. and he is known for sharing the health benefits that he claims he gets from taking these ice baths. And they have to do with strengthening his immune system, slowing down the aging process, improving circulation in the body, oxygenating the cells, things like that, improving mood, like, you know, also avoiding or dissipating like anxiety and like depression and stuff like that. I was just wondering if you, and so I was directed by a friend to someone a few towns over who has an establishment where they've been doing these ice baths for the community. So I called them up and I was interested in learning more about it. And he doesn't connect it to Wim Hof at all, but apparently he claimed that this is like an ancient practice. So like Wim Hof is just, I guess, popular for doing it today, but that is very ancient. But I was just wondering if you had any experience with ice baths. I know that athletes get in ice baths a lot. You know, like I've seen basketball players and stuff do it. But I was just wondering if you personally had anything to share about that.
Yeah, there's nothing new about this. This is many, many years ago, decades ago. I dabbled in that, probably in the 90s. But another aspect of what we did in the woods, we didn't have any power. We didn't have any hot water. We didn't have anything. So when you're there for a week or two, you know, you got to take, and I'm talking wintertime. So there comes a point when you have to wash and the water is, you can put it in something to let the sun warm it up, but it's cold. It's very cold. And the reason why I brought that up, it's nothing to do with your question, except the fact that this living at 72 degrees all the time, the perfect temperature, is very, kind of makes you lazy, makes your system lazy. It doesn't have to work much. Your ability to handle the warmth and your ability to handle the cold is making your system work better. And getting into an ice bath or the cold like that is very obviously stimulating. And again, I'm not an expert on that, but I dabbled in it and I can see the stimulation it creates. I just find there's many other ways to do the same concept. And yeah, it's very uncomfortable. You've done it? Or you're just learning about it?
No, sir, I haven't done it, but I've gotten used to turning the water very cold at the end of my shower for like a few minutes, and I feel like an instant, like instantly, I think it reduces inflammation. So I start to breathe better through my nose, like almost instantly. But one thing that I was really kind of curious about, sir, is they're doing these there's an event at this establishment that I mentioned on Saturday where they're doing these ice baths, but it's outside. And Saturday is going to be like 20 degrees or something. So I was kind of questioning whether I should even try to do this because I'm going to get out of the ice water into like ice atmosphere type of Arctic blast. So I was just wondering if I should wait until the springtime. But then he told me that part of it is learning to be comfortable in the uncomfortable. And then he mentioned doing some type of horse stance to generate heat in the body because you don't want hypothermia to set in and stuff. So
yeah,
but I haven't done that yet. So
yeah, I recommend you experience it for yourself, and you can even bring it back what your experience was, not one time. I mean, it can't be this one-time shock. Okay, so many times I've done sweat lodges in the winter, and it's ice cold outside, so you go from extreme heat where you can barely breathe to extreme cold, and as I said, showering in the ice cold, it's all mental. Being comfortable in the uncomfortable is a decision. It's like, I don't have a choice, got to do this, and then you change. It changes you mentally and physically because you're accepting the uncomfortable. And yes, that is a very powerful lesson. I agree with that. No question. It is really the same concept in the martial arts that you're practicing. You have to go, what's the saying? You have to taste bitter. Tasting bitter is sitting in stance two, the mabu, for long periods of time, or walking the circle for long periods of time when you're practicing that. It's getting to being uncomfortable, working through it, repeating something beyond boredom. And in that process, you overcome yourself, you overcome your mind, you overcome, and you learn what's on the other side of that, because most people stop short. Greatness in anything is incredibly rare because people are unwilling to taste bitter or be uncomfortable. They want to be comfortable, and then they want all these things. This art we practice is phenomenal, and it has many, many ways to practice the same thing. Now, we're not talking hot and cold. We're talking hard work. We're talking repetition beyond the norm. Stories of 6, 8, I trained many years, 6 hours, and taught for 3, leading every class. So that was 9 hours a day, martial arts, at least 3 days a week, 9 hours a day, and 4 to 6 the other days. So I just loved it that much, had the passion for it, and just, I didn't even count. I would just go for a certain amount of time. I'd feel tired, I'd relax, then go back and practice again. And it's getting past the discomfort. This dabbling and doing a little bit, and then you feel a little uncomfortable, and then you're done. And if you're in your stances and your legs are shaking and you can't do it, you're not doing what I'm saying. You're unwilling to do the work to actually become very good at this and get the most out of it. And I don't mean that to knock anybody. This is just factual. It just is what it is. It's impossible to become great at anything without extreme repetition, with focus. So if you're going to go in the winter to this cold, you have to just shift your mind and realize you are far more powerful than you realize. Than you know. You have to realize you're far more powerful than you know. You have to experience that. That's what I mean by realize. You have to just decide, I'm going to do this because I want this experience. You can't have that experience in the summer. Cold water in the summer feels good. What's the point? Go jump in the Pacific Ocean. It's ice cold in the summer. So cold, not comfortable. So, no, that defeats the purpose. Yeah, that's all. So I agree with what they're saying. Now, you brought up something that, how far do I want to go into this? Well, let me ask, what is the immune system? When you say it improves the immune system, this is where I differ from the mainstream. What is the immune system? Why do we have cold and flu season? People tend to get sick when they're, let me put it this way. Every week we have garbage to take out. If you've ever had a week or two where you forgot, then it's a big job. Or maybe you clean something out and you got a lot more garbage. Just a lot more garbage to take out, you might need help. That's pretty much what's happening in your body. When there's a temperature change up and down, if you're not healthy, you're not going to be able, your metabolism can't keep up with it. It's not, that's again with the discomfort. When the temperature is warm, you're comfortable, you're happy, then it drops, you're very uncomfortable, or vice versa. There's people that need it cold all the time because they're too hot inside. So their metabolism's off. Okay, it's like their inner thermostat is off. Your body should be able to adjust, and things like the heat we have, and especially the air conditioning in the summer, is very unnatural for the body. Your body never gets to adjust to the natural temperatures. So let's say you're working in an office all day in the summer, and then you go out into the heat. You're so cool that outside it's too hot. Your body doesn't know how to adjust. So what's happening is your body is getting screwed up, it's getting weaker, and it can't keep up with taking out the garbage. So a cold or a flu is simply a detoxification. It's your body taking out the garbage with a bigger job because it couldn't keep up with the normal ways, which is pooping and peeing and through the skin, sweating. And this is what people don't get. People think there's this, 4,000 power electron microscope that this tiny thing is making you sick, and this is not factual, and this is not new to me. It's just hard for people to get unless you study it. But more than 20 years ago, I've been talking about detoxification like this. And our practice, one of the things, when you say it boosts the immune system, one of the things that really boosts the immune system is movement. Not being still. Your lymphatic system is how your body gets rid of all the poisons and toxins and basically the poop from the cells, the waste from the cells. Your lymphatic system takes it out through the blood system, then through the skin or the liver, the kidney, you pee, your poop, whatever. That's normal metabolism. Your lymphatic system has no pump other than the muscle movement. So your lymphatic system is actually your immune system, how your body clears poisons. If you get poisoned, your body's going to have to clear that poison. You might get a cold, you might get a flu, you might get diarrhea, you might have vomiting. This is all ways the body clears toxins. That is natural, that is normal, and anything that tries to put a stop to that is going to cause more toxification in the body and probably things like cancer in the future. So take that for what it's worth. I'm watching my language, but I want you to understand when we're talking true natural laws and true natural principles. I loved what one of my teachers said to me when I would ask a lot of Western-oriented questions. He said, stop chasing the cells. And that was 10, 15 years ago, and it just got me thinking like, yeah, the body works as a system. And when the system's off, then it doesn't work, right? Then it breaks down. You have problems. So the stimulation that would come from the extreme hot or the extreme cold, especially what you're talking about with the ice water, yeah, your blood flow is going to be, it's like putting your body under a stress. If a tree grows without any kind of weather, without any kind of stress, the wood is not going to be good to build with. So your body that doesn't have any stress is going to become weak. So that's a way to create stress. Same with our stance work or our training, low stances, making those muscles shake. When you shock the body, it changes, it grows. So I don't think there's something special about the cold water. It's just another way of shocking the body. Just like somebody goes to the gym and beats the hell out of themselves. It's a way to shock the body. Somebody else sits on the couch all the time. All the body does is get weaker and weaker. That's why when it gets a little warm, a little humid, and we have to have air conditioning or we think we're going to die, that's a problem. Because our body is not able to cope. It doesn't know how to adjust with change. Staying the same is completely against all natural laws. Nothing in nature stays the same. Warm, cold, windy, damp, dry, it's always changing. Day, night, etc., etc. This is Bagua in philosophy, in life. So yeah, if you're stagnant, anyway, in the Bagua, that's thunder. Thunder's like the child sitting there playing video games all day, many hours, and grandma comes over and slaps him in the face. It's like, wow. Snaps him out of this virtual reality he is in and gets him back into reality. So you'll have a real dose of reality when you get in that cold water. And that's why. How strong is your mind? You just decide. Bam. One time playing a game in the woods, because a lot of times we would do all kinds of old games and things. I got in this kind of wrestling match I was protecting my tribe, and I got thrown in the lake in the middle of winter, with all my clothes on. So then I had to stay like that and get myself back with nothing but a fire. It was just one of those things. Did I die? No. Did I get sick? No. Why would I maybe have gotten sick? If my body couldn't keep up with the change. The shock creates a change that my body can't keep up with. Now the garbage builds up again. I hope you're following that. If your body can't keep up with the normal process, the garbage builds up, and that's where you end up with a cold or a flu. Any questions on that in that regard? Come on, challenge me. I want to know if I lost you, because it was a good question, but it leads into more about how the body works. Yes, sir.
So would you say that people that worked outside all day in the rain and the different elements were a lot healthier than people who were lived a more privileged life of not having to do any physical work? Is that the point you're trying to make? Is that
Stronger. It's like being able to handle adversity.
because I know that with the military, the British special forces recruit people from the Scottish Highlands because they're used to being up in the altitudes and going up and down and dealing with rocky terrain. That's how they lived. That's the way they were raised, as in that part of the country. They're just used to being outside in all types of weather. And I know that for the United States Navy SEALs, the number one reason why people drop out of that program is their inability to stay in cold water for a prolonged period of time. That's why they quit. They just can't take that, being submerged in water for long periods of time. Those are the guys who quit.
Now, I would love to study that one over time, because my guess is it's getting much worse.
Mm-hmm.
Because in my opinion, in my observation, people are getting far more mentally weak. They're getting weaker and weaker mentally, and so they can't handle things. That's why people snap. That's why they're irritable. That's why they're emotional turmoil. They have no control of their mind or their emotions.
Right.
And this is where martial arts comes in. That's why the military and martial arts are very parallel. It's the same concept. Discomfort. Get comfortable in discomfort. Yeah, exactly. What Mr. Antomate said with that, what he was told. It's an example. To be able to go into that cold is an example of what kind of self-control you have. How does a yoga monk from India sit in they put sheets over him that are soaking wet in the middle of winter, in the ice cold, freezing temperatures, and he'll sit there in meditation and dry that sheet. Because his mind is so strong and so focused that he can generate heat from inside, which the body already does. Yeah, let me digress with that right now. Okay, how do you survive in the winter without heat? Make a fire, obviously, is one thing. But if you, like a squirrel in the nest, if you put enough leaves, enough debris, thick enough, and you close yourself in there, your body temperature will reflect back to you. You see? We have an internal heat. But obviously in that cold water, the mind has to be very strong in order to relax and generate that heat. Because even on a motorcycle, I've experienced that in the winter. A lot of my longest rides were in the middle of the winter. And there's a point where your body can go into such a shivering that is very, very hard to control. And so a lot of my rides were actually training in my mind. So you don't need water, just get out in the cold like that. But almost to the point of being unsafe. And I would try to use my mind. I would not try, I would use my mind and I would continue to breathe to make myself warm. And it was not easy. There were times I couldn't, it was like uncontrollable. But there were periods where I could stop it. I could calm the body down and keep myself feeling warmer. This is all mind. This is all mental strength and control inside. And Mr. Antomate, you're of a younger generation here. So I challenge you. Go do it. Go do it and find out what you're made of. Now, I know you're made of much more than maybe you know, but you'll find out. And I think you'll walk away from it with a real experience. And what is life about? Beyond experience. Who wants to be the same all the time? You should go and experience things, try things, overcome what you think is too much. I wouldn't say necessarily something dangerous, but people do that too, and some die. But that's what they wanted to do, like climbing without ropes. It's like, oh well, you slipped. I don't think that's wise, but there are things like we're talking about that just challenge you. And then come back and go after your Bagua with that sort of resolve to do more than is comfortable. And then the brain is going to respond by making your body stronger, more able to do what you're asking. Because if you ask less, you get less. If you ask more, you get more. Another question, maybe one more. Let me ask you a question. Anybody has the answer? How did I work to overcome the shivering? How can you? This can help Mr. Antomate too if he does this. How can you overcome it? There's multiple parts to this. Mr. Rudd, what do you think? Give me your best answer.
I've been in that position about the shaking so much. The one time on the fall retreat when we were working out, and then we went out to that area with the chairs with the cross by the lake. And everyone had jackets on, and I didn't realize, and I went out there soaking wet, and I was like vibrating almost. Actually, I got back to the cabin and I put on this like army blanket that I had, but I can't think of. But that's one thing. I've been in a couple of positions like that. Like my wife likes to have the overhead fan on when we're sleeping, and I'll move around and my blankets come off, and I'll wake up in the middle of the night like contorting almost, which I guess she thinks funny, but
so you can definitely end up with a cold like that. Now explain to me how you can get a cold. It happened to me under a draft. How can you get a cold because you're in the cold? And based on what I said, anyway, hold that question. Let's go back to the first one. I'm going to try to remember to ask the second one. All right, but answer the question. Well, how can you control that shivering?
I don't know. I might be copping out, but I get a blanket, but I don't think that's the answer you're looking for.
I mean, that's a wise choice, but I'm saying, how do you control the body shaking? You can't just warm it up. How do you warm it up without the blanket? What if you didn't have the blanket? When you're out there shivering, that's what I'm talking about. You need to apply this. You have to apply what you've learned in Bagua.
I'm thinking it has something to do with breathing.
Very good.
Because your breath is, like your muscles are shaking, your breath is almost kind of shaking. I think you have to control your breathing.
Okay, so let's remind everyone, the breathing is the bridge between the mind and the body. This is the same for pain control and tolerance. You don't focus on being cold. You focus on controlling your breath, which is also calming your mind. So your mind not focusing on the problem, your mind focusing on the solution. And that's true for pretty much anything in life. You focus on the solution. If you focus on the problem gets bigger and it grows and it becomes overwhelming, and you can get lost in it and go into a panic and become emotional. And I think you know where I'm going with this. But if you focus on your breathing to calm and relax your body, which is already you're focusing, so now your mind is on that instead of the problem, which is the cold in this case, you relax more and you can even imagine the warmth. Mr. Avilés, let's hear your answer. Can you add anything to what I just said?
Power exhale.
You got it. That's what I was doing. See, that's a smart answer. Because power exhale makes the dantian go bam, bam, and which is going to send qi and blood to the extremities. It's also good if you're falling asleep. Do some power exhales. In fact, open your mouth. Ha! Make it really loud. And it just like, it'll shock you, very similar to jumping into cold water. It's another way to shock your system. Because if you sit there and you're driving and you're tired, it's too comfortable, right? Make yourself a little uncomfortable. Make bring up some energy, really. And it's the same kind of thing. You pump the blood, because when the dantian grows, it helps push blood flow. That's why breathing is supposed to be through the diaphragm, down into the belly, not up in the chest. When you breathe properly, you are helping your circulatory system, your lymphatic system, you're giving massage to your organs. You're helping your heart. Your heart is supposed to work all by itself. So that's why, people always think, oh, I'm practicing martial arts, punching, kicking, throwing, locking. It's like, what about all this other stuff? What about all this control? And if we were talking self-defense, how could this apply? If somebody jumps you, somebody attacks you, somebody, gets the jump on you, if you go into a panic, you could be pretty much dead if that's their intent. You have to breathe, calm down, evaluate, figure out how to get out of the situation. It's the same. You get thrown in cold water, you panic, hyperthermia. Somebody jumps you, you panic, you can be maimed or killed. How many examples can you think of where the breath and the focus there and on the solution rather than the problem? How does that help you? There's so many parallels in our practice to our life. Let's go to meditation.